Good afternoon. My name is Brian Wheeler, Director of Communications for the City of Charlottesville. Welcome to Cville360, a program to inform and engage the Charlottesville community. During the coronavirus pandemic, the city's leadership knows you want to hear from us frequently about our actions. We also want to hear from you and to provide opportunities for engagement. We've launched this program on our streaming sites, Comcast Channel 10, and on a companion Zoom webinar so you can tune in live and on demand while practicing social distancing. The webinar allows you to join the broadcast and ask questions of our guest. If you'd like to try the webinar, visit charlottesville.org/Zoom for the registration information. A link to each show appears at the bottom of the page. At the top of each show, we will have a brief update on the state of the coronavirus and the city's response from the city's Fire Chief, Andrew Baxter, who will join us today via webinar. After the Chief's update, the remainder of the program will focus on doing business with the city during the pandemic, and specifically, we will explore how neighborhood development has changed up its business process. We have a panel of at least 5 city staff ready to share information and take your questions. And whether you're with the media or a community member, you can type your question in the Q&A module of the webinar, or you can click the raise your hand icon and I'll bring you on to the panel to talk to our guest. So first we're going to start with Chief Baxter and bring the Chief on here. Chief, can you unmute your microphone? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay, Brian?
We can hear you, Chief. Go ahead and give the community an update on the current state of the city's response to the coronavirus.
Sure thing. So our strategic goals remain the same, providing essential services, protecting and supporting our vulnerable populations, including our first responders and other essential workers that are out in the community. And then also sustaining the healthcare system, flattening the curve, doing what we can as a locality to reduce the impact on the health system of COVID-19 cases. In terms of case update, we're still about a day behind in terms of data. I mentioned during our last broadcast that the Thomas Jefferson Health District and VDH are looking at some new tracking methodology to make sure they're not, I believe the challenge was looking at where people live versus their zip code. So we might have been some challenging counting there. But our latest data still shows 50 in the county COVID positive and 18 in the city. And COVID positive includes a small number that are clinically diagnosed as COVID that are pending a test, meaning they were living in close or intimate contact with a known COVID-19 positive patient. So a husband or a wife or something of that nature living in the same household. Some areas of focus that we continue to have, obviously our vulnerable populations. We're continuing to work with our homeless population, and that is one of the groups that we've in working with a partnership with the University of Virginia, have access to a more rapid test to confirm a COVID diagnosis using the COVID clinic. So that was a big step forward and took a little bit of time to work through, but a terrific partnership with the city, the county, and the university and the health district to make that happen. In terms of first response, we talked the other day with Chief Brackney about some of the modified responses and practices in law enforcement. We're continuing a parallel effort, particularly with EMS services, and we use what we now refer to as a scout model. So our citizens will see, one provider come to the door and begin to ask questions, and we're doing that so we can make sure that we're providing our folks with information about the right level of personal protective equipment they need on each incident. I'm happy to report that our feeding plan has transitioned over to World Central Kitchen, which is an effort that many people may be familiar with a particular chef who does this around the world. But locally, John Kluge, Hunter Smith, and Chantel Bingham are supporting that for feeding all of our area first responders. And that takes a significant load off of our folks in terms of their potential exposures in the community simply going out to the grocery store. So we're very excited to receive that kind of support. Also, we're seeing still tremendous effort from Support Cville and Equip Cville. We received 2 donations within the last few days, one from Silverback and one from Vitae Spirits for hand sanitizer. And so that's helping us along with seeing some beginning of some movement in our supply chains. It's PPE is still going to be a big challenge moving forward, but hopefully, again, if we can flatten this curve through social distancing and effective community efforts, it'll give that supply chain time to rebound from its current stresses, and we can begin to make sure that we have actually some excess capacity in PPE. So from the 911 center's perspective, our call volume remains down year over year. This week, we're down about 20% over the same week last year. We continue to do surveillance screening at the 911 center. That's sort of the first echelon where we're beginning to try and tease out, is this a high-risk patient or not? And we had, for example, 4 positive screenings just through those questions that we're asking 911 callers in the last 24 hours. Our number one call type remains difficulty breathing, which is not surprising given the fact that this is a respiratory symptoms that are generally respiratory. And then we did receive yesterday 6 calls for service for a violation of the executive order split between the city and the county and the university. We still have the COVID-19 hotline set up with Thomas Jefferson Health District personnel manning that hotline, and those calls continue to decrease. We're down to about 20 a day, which is a dramatic drop from a couple of weeks ago. And we suspect that that's because people are now finding other places for their information, or they now know the basic information and the basic facts about COVID.
Chief, one of the questions I've got is, after listening to Governor Cuomo talk about New York, and he was emphasizing today not to let their guard down, that even though they may be seeing some trends downward in their new admissions in the hospital, what can you tell our audience about our peak case expectations, when we think that date will be, and then what we need to keep in mind after we pass that date?
Yeah, really good question, and I think I saw the same news conference this morning with Governor Cuomo. So we're now looking at various models that show the peak in Virginia around April 20th. What that doesn't give you is a potential window into a peak in a particular area. So we're taking all those models really with a grain of salt. And just remember, this is a bell-shaped curve, so the peak, the day after the peak is similar to the day before the peak, which is still a very dangerous time. So it's very, very important for people to understand that for a considerable time moving forward, we're going to need to be engaged in pretty aggressive social distancing. I'd remind folks that, for many folks, this is an important holiday weekend in terms of being Easter weekend, and we're in the middle of Passover. The last 2 weekends, looking at our Unicast social distancing scoreboard, I've mentioned before that in this forum that we've seen over the weekends that our social distancing grade goes down because people are more active and are maybe not being as strict with adhering to social distancing guidelines. And you couple that with 2 significant religious holidays this weekend, and we know there's a clear linkage between COVID-19 cases that have been contact traced back to 2 particular types of activity, and it's attendance at religious services and attendance at funerals. So that's sort of a perfect storm this weekend that we'd really like to remind people to avoid if at all possible. There's no really good reason to do either one of those things, and these are difficult topics, and we understand that, but the risk that we're taking by lifting that lid too soon on social distancing is pretty dramatic. And so that social distancing, the hand hygiene, and then if for the general public wearing a cloth or face mask in public, that's to protect other people, remember, then we're going to need to really continue to emphasize those things.
Well, another thing Governor Cuomo said was, don't be selfish. We need to focus on the we right now, and I think that's an important message. We have a question, Chief, from Taylor Fowler about the types of executive order violations that you've been seeing. I don't know if you have any more details about those that you could share.
I don't. It's a great question. The situation report that I see every afternoon doesn't get down to that level of granularity. I can certainly ask Chief Brackney and Chief Lance and Chief Longo for some more detailed information about that.
And we did have a show earlier this week with Chief Brackney. On that program, you can watch on demand and see the response that Chief Brackney and Joe Platania gave, our Commonwealth's attorney, about how they are practicing their enforcement efforts on the governor's executive orders. Before we let the chief go, I want to make sure the public has an opportunity to ask any other questions they have for the chief. You can just raise your hand or type it into the Q&A module, and then we will get over to the business of talking about neighborhood development. Chief, one thing you might plug at the end here is the COVID-19 town hall that the Thomas Jefferson Health District is going to have tomorrow. And I've got those details here, but what can you tell us about how that came about?
Well, we continue to get a lot of questions that are really best answered by the medical professionals and epidemiologists and people that work in public health all day, every day. And so we thought it would be important to have a community forum where people can ask those specific questions and have Dr. Bonds and some of her staff available with some of us public safety types as well to answer questions from the public.
Great. That broadcast will be at 3 o'clock tomorrow, April 10th, and that will be live on the same channels that you're watching this broadcast. For more information, you can go to charlottesville.org/Zoom to learn about that Thomas Jefferson Health District Town Hall. And that will feature Catherine Goodman with the Thomas Jefferson Health District, Dr. Denise Bonds, Dr. Costi Sifri, Chief Dan Eggleston from Albemarle County, our own Chief Baxter, and Chief Tim Longo from UVA. So we look forward to having them interact with the community and talk about our continuing efforts on this front. Well, we're going to switch gears now and spend the remainder of today's program focused on doing business with the city during this pandemic. And specifically, we're going to look at how neighborhood development has changed up its business practices. I want to show you the panel of experts that we've gathered to speak with you today. And good, they're all sitting in front of their computers still. That's helpful. We have Missy Creasy, who's the Deputy Director for Planning, and wave to us when I say your name. Lisa Robertson, the Deputy City Attorney. We have Tom Elliott, Code Official. And we have Jack Dawson, our City Engineer. All right, they're all paying attention. That's good. We're going to start here in the studio, though, and focus with Chris Engel. Make sure I get the right screen up there. There we go. Chris, you've been on the program before talking about our local businesses. In particular, we talked about restaurants and some of the things the Economic Development Department has done to help them in this difficult time. But another big part of the business community is the development community. What can you tell us about what they're facing right now and why you think it's important the city change how we do business?
Sure, thanks, Brian. Let me first say that I think it's really important that the public understand that the city is open for business. Some of the processes might be different, a little unusual given the circumstances, but the majority of the development processes actually are continuing even amidst the pandemic. And the panel of experts that you'll hear from today are actually on the ground making those things happen as we speak. From my perspective as an economic developer, I'm certainly concerned with the overall health of the community, but in particular, the job creation aspects of the community or business formation aspects, and as these are primary drivers. So orderly, predictable processes to allow business to continue and to allow spaces that businesses can form in and operate in and create jobs in is absolutely important. So an interruption in the process will have a ripple effect down the line. So I think it's in our best interest to keep our process moving as best we can given the circumstances. Just a bit of context with respect to the industry, the development/construction industry. Construction accounts for about 7,000 jobs in the MSA, and it's the 5th largest industry sector. By and large, that sector has not been impacted as much. Current projects are able to continue. They happen outdoors. They can social distance a little better. So we've been fortunate to be able to see those type of things continue. Folks might be interested to know that in the past 10 years, $1.5 billion that's a B, $1.5 billion has been invested in the city of Charlottesville in our 10 square miles. So that's residential, commercial, or institutional investment. That's significant for a small city, and we're delighted that that is the case. I referenced the last time I was on the show that in 2019 we had the highest single level of commercial investment in a single year, $145 million in 2019. So here we are in 2020, moving on from that. Some of that investment is still materializing through some significant projects, as we know. Speaking of significant projects, there's 500,000 square feet of Class A commercial space under construction now in the city. Several big projects that are very noticeable. You can see the cranes around town. Those are primarily office space buildings that we have not seen in over a decade. We haven't seen any brand new Class A office space of any significant size in over a decade. So it's a real opportunity. It's taken a while for those projects to come to fruition, to get through the process, to start building. They are building, and we're delighted to see them continue. But it's those type of projects that allow for that job creation and that business formation that I spoke about as an economic developer being so important, because those type of jobs, when you have one job in a primary traded sector type business like that, it creates 3 and 4 other service related jobs in the ripple effect or the multiplier effect that we see in economic development. So when these spaces come online to allow for local companies and new companies to grow, that creates additional opportunity for others in the service sector to support that. So that's why that's critically important. Should also probably mention that a majority, 60% of the city's budget, comes from the real estate tax base, which is obviously fed by the development process, either through new investment or reinvestment. And so to continue to keep that pipeline full is critical to growing revenue that the city can use for various purposes. As I mentioned, most of the projects that are already started are not impacted by the current situation. I think the challenge is to create awareness amongst contractors, developers, et cetera, investors, that there are changes to the process given the virus, and to mitigate those as best we can and make sure future projects have a defined path so that they can come online in an orderly fashion.
Well, and that's a key goal of this program today, is to make sure that we can help describe the current practices that the neighborhood development team has put into place. And we're going to start with Missy Creasy, and we'll bring her on here. Hello, Missy, can you hear us? All right. Well, first, how are you doing? And what's it been like for you and your team to adjust to doing business during this pandemic?
Well, it's definitely been very different. This is the first time I've been in the office in a while, and I came in only because we lost power. The wind has caused a lot of power outages around here, so hopefully folks will get their power back soon. I hope I do as well. But we've been doing a lot from afar. We have a few people who are in the office regularly. We have all of our field folks in their cars. So they go from their cars to sites and then to their homes in order to do the paperwork. And we have a protocol set up so that folks come in the office to pick up materials in order to keep reviews going. But in order to do that, we make sure that we know when folks are coming in and that we have that pretty limited, because we want to continue to adhere to all of the regulations that are out in front of us right now. But we're finding that we've been able, at this point in time, to successfully meet deadlines on reviews. And as things continue in the manner that they are, we foresee that continuing to occur. So we were given the opportunity. We've been working quite a bit behind the scenes, and I know it's taken a little while for us to get information out to the public. Anyone who is working with a particular project has been in touch with their point of contact, their planner, and they've been working with them on next steps and how that's addressed. But we hadn't gotten all of our things together until now in order to have an updated proposal for where we are with lots of our operations. So we now have that out in a press release that communications sent out earlier today, as well as on our website with links to different contacts So we're hopeful that that information will be helpful. Also, part of what I will be doing is going over that information so that if you haven't had a chance to review it yet, and then we'll work our way to questions. We have a number of staff available, as you all saw earlier, to assist with questions, also to hear what the community is thinking about different things. We also anticipate some questions. There's some things that we have definitely had some struggles with on how to make it work. And then other things, once we've gotten a few pieces of equipment in place, we've been able to make it work fine. So this is just an opportunity for us to provide an update where we are, provide some education on that, and then answer questions. And do know that we are all available during the week regularly, by email, by phone. Folks have their phones forwarded and emails open, so there are ways to reach us, and we're all communicating very regularly. So they're, it's similar to what we were before, but it's taking into account where we are in the world right now. So I'll go to the first part of that, and we wanted to talk about how the development process is working now that City Hall is closed. So folks can't come into City Hall, but we are still keeping things moving. So we had a number of pending developments, and so we are continuing to process those reviews. We started by just working with the reviews that we had in-house, and then we worked through a process to continue the resubmissions on those. So the following things are things that we have in the works at this point in time. We're reviewing site plans and plats that were submitted and received prior to March 12th, and I'll talk a little bit about where that date comes from in a minute. The same with resubmissions of all those information items. Same with stormwater management plans, erosion and sediment controls plans. We're keeping those moving. Building permit applications, we have a very good process in place for moving those forward in our current state. We've made some enhancements this week, which will hopefully come to take effect, and note some of the concerns that we've heard from the community on that. We're also reviewing bond submissions and reduction requests, and then other items that we normally receive for building, engineering, utility, and zoning functions of our department, property maintenance as well. We're handling inquiries, citizen requests, comments, calls for information. All of those things are still continuing to move on. So when you submit an application, how do you do that these days? Well, we found that the best way to do that, safest for everyone, is through the Postal Service. So we're receiving everything through the mail at this point in time. For building permits, also including mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and then fire suppression, certificate of occupancy request as well. You send a hard copy to the department, and that's P.O. Box 911, Charlottesville 22902, and attention permitting. And we have folks that are in here processing those a couple of times a week, so those things keep flowing through. In addition, we ask that you call our main number. We now have our main number transferred to an actual phone. So during business hours, you will actually get to speak to a person, and hopefully that will help with some of the concerns that we've had. They're still being sent to a message service, which transcribes the requests that we receive, and then that information moves forward from there. So you need to get a building permit done. We have our applications are online. You can give us a call if the fee schedule isn't clear to you, or contact one of our permit clerks, who's we have their information online, as well as our main number. And you can submit your information once you put all the package together for the building permit. For other applications for pending items, and that includes site plans, subdivisions, erosion and sediment control, stormwater management plans, bonds, as-built, and requests for construction inspections. this is another opportunity where you can send the information through the mail. You want to make sure you have a full packet. In the case of the items I just mentioned, you have a point of contact currently, and you'll be working with that person, and they'll help you make sure that all the information that you need will be put together before you submit that package. And so you'll send the materials to us to the attention of that person. And many of our applicants already do this. It is a bit unusual because some of our community folks have been used to just coming in and dropping things off, and that's not where we are in the world at this moment. But that's where we are. We're trying to make things as safe as possible for everyone. And then
Hey, Missy.
Oh, sorry, Brian.
That's okay. I'm asking you to hold up just for a second.
Sure.
We're going to put up on the screen a link to the NDS page where this frequently asked questions document is available. That's at charlottesville.org/NDS. And we would encourage you to take a look at all the documentation there. I think many of the things that you're going to hear Missy and our other panelists talk about today are answered in detail in that document. We do have a number of questions coming in, Missy, and we'll come back to anything that you've got that we haven't gone over yet. But one of the questions relates to is as follows. Will City Council vote on an SUP during the pandemic, or do we have to wait for quote-unquote normal meetings to resume?
Well, right now the guidance that we have is that City Council can meet about items that are specific to the emergency situation. And so a special use permit is not likely to meet that criteria, so we are on hold with applications that are moving forward to boards and commissions, committees, planning commission, BAR. That's another question that I saw that has come up concerning meeting virtually with the boards and commissions. And those items are on hold. Applications are continued at the moment. Council is working to hold different meetings along the way, and the resources that need to be put together to have these different meetings, it takes a little bit of work to do that. And so once council gets a handle on things, we may be able to work a few things from there, but for the most part, until we have different direction, we're going to continue to have those applications on hold.
I want to bring in our Deputy City Attorney, Lisa Robertson, and just to get some more feedback about some of the challenges all of our boards and commissions are facing. I mean, what can you tell our webinar participants and viewers about what we're able to do right now, Lisa?
Hi. At the end of March, City Council took some action by an ordinance, and the council's ability to provide for meetings to take place outside the normal procedure where at least a quorum has to be assembled together for purposes of FOIA. Council's ability to go outside those parameters is very limited. So there is a state law that allows City Council to take actions necessary to provide for continuity of government in a disaster situation. And we regard continuity of government as being things such as getting a budget approved and making sure that expenditures can be made, making sure that adequate provisions, if they require action by council or some other board or commission in order to facilitate emergency responses, that those sorts of things can take place temporarily through electronic meetings. But the statutory authority that's out there doesn't broadly authorize all sorts of the normal activities and meetings that would take place for regular business matters. So for the time being, unless a particular matter rises to the level of impacting continuity of government, the authorization that City Council has adopted, allowing particularly itself to meet entirely electronically, can only be implemented to the extent that the things they need to take up at that meeting are essential for continuity of government. And most of the normal types of zoning applications don't rise to that level at this point in time, but we can, hopefully this emergency will, as the fire chief said, hopefully will peak as soon as possible, and we can start getting back to some normal activities.
Thank you, Lisa. Missy, you had started to talk about how we are mailing things to City Hall right now, and that's the best way for plans and permits to be submitted. One of the questions we have via the webinar is, have we looked at electronic review and submittal processes? I wonder if that's something you can talk about.
That's actually something we have Jack designated to talk about.
Okay,
so,
let's bring Jack on.
Bring Jack forward.
Jack, go ahead.
Oh, unmute, Jack.
All right. Hello, this is Jack Dawson. I'm the city engineer in the engineering division of Public Works. And in regards to the electronic submittal and review of plans, the way that the code and the ordinances are set up, they actually require hard copy submittals of the plans. This is obviously not ideal in this situation, and while the city's been moving towards acquiring a program that will allow for that, currently the system is not set up, the land management system that handles all the permitting is not set up to flip a switch and accept electronic submittals. That's something that's in process, but it's the procurement of that system and the implementation of that system, which was underway, isn't something that's going to get done rapidly. Again, there's further issues that complex plans, the city needs hardware and software to support the review of engineering plans, for example, on hardware. You can't do what's typically done in a 38-page, 24 by 36 inch set. Reviewing that information isn't necessarily doable on a laptop, which currently most of the staff has. In areas where it's not a code mandate or it's not required a very detailed technical review, we're allowing electronic submittals. That's primarily in regards to administrative paperwork, as it falls under the erosion control and storm management program, because those are things that typically evolve during the process and are edited at the end of the process once things are settled, land disturbance, acreage, and things like that. And so, again, is working from a laptop has been as amenable as possible to working and ironing out those things electronically. And then when it comes time to record them or execute them, we have processes in place for that. But while the city is moving towards that, it's not something that's possible for a multitude of reasons at this point in time to receive electronic plans.
Thank you, Jack. Missy, we have another question from Frank Stoner about Dropbox options. Is that something we're able to do?
Well, at the current time, we found that submitting materials by mail is the safest way for staff as well as for the community for us to receive materials. Initially, we tried to keep our intake window open, but we found that we were having pretty high volumes and our workspace is not set up in such a way that we're able to maintain the safe distance requirements. And we had difficulty with people adhering to that. And so, we continue to reevaluate different ways that we can make things work in our changed world. But at this point in time, the safest way for that to occur is through the mail.
Excellent. Let's bring Tom Elliott on. I'm going to unmute your microphone, Tom, and ask you about pre-construction meetings. Wonder if you can give an example of your experience on how we're doing those in this environment.
Yes, it's Tom Elliott, city building official. We had a pre-construction meeting last week with Martin Horn, and the planner set those up. And I think there were about seven people in the meeting, and it went great. Martin Horn, they appreciated us being able to work with them. So pre-construction meetings, they are, I think most developers probably already know that they're set up by the planner. The planner for that area will set the set the pre-construction meeting up, and normally, we meet in person, but, the virtual meeting we had, was successful.
Excellent. And while we've got you, tell us about how inspections are being done. How can people call to confirm that they're getting one, and how are they working in general?
They're working a lot better than I thought they would. People requesting an inspection, they still call the main number, 970-3182, the number they've always called, and they leave a message, and then the inspector will call the requester the morning of the inspection, and if it's a footing inspection or something outside, then they make a site inspection. The inspectors will go over and personally do the inspection. If it's a inspection inside a building, the inspectors are asking the contractor or the builder to use an app on their phone, Google Duo, and then they do a video inspection. So so far it's been working good. I communicate daily with the inspectors, and contractors have gotten in touch with me, and they've they mentioned that it's working well. So we haven't really had any problems. We're still getting the same number of inspections that we got before this thing.
Excellent. I'm going to switch over to Lisa Robertson. I'm going to unmute your microphone, Lisa. We've got a question about how the clerk's office is handling recordation and development-related documents, plats, easements, stormwater maintenance agreements. How are those things being handled during the shutdown?
My understanding is that the circuit court clerk's office will allow people to make appointments to bring deeds or other documents that need to be recorded. No one on the city side of things has had to do that yet, but my understanding is that if there are things like a stormwater management agreement or a deed that goes with a plat that's dedicating an easement to the city, that the attorney for a developer or the developer itself can make an appointment with the clerk to take those documents over and have them recorded.
Excellent. Thank you. We've got a question from Neil Williamson for Chris Engel. How will the NDS freeze on new development, as he describes it in public hearings, impact the economic vitality and tax revenue of the city? And when do you anticipate the city will feel this economic ripple impact us?
Well, it's a good question. I think it all depends on how long the stay-at-home orders stay in place and how long it takes us to get back to kind of a normal situation. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, any type of interruption will ultimately have a ripple effect. If we're talking a month and a half or two, we might see just a minor blip. If we're 4, 5, 6 months, obviously we're going to see a much more significant interruption. And it's my hope as an economic developer for the city that we minimize that to the extent that we can, given the environment that we're working in to process the plans.
Yep. And I know our revenue team and our budget team has been meeting frequently and getting ready for the next city council meeting when we can talk about the budget. We expect them to have a meeting soon to set the tax rate at least, because we need to get those advertisements in the mail, or get those tax bills in the mail. And then the council and the city manager will be discussing the way to proceed with the budget. We do know it's going to have a serious impact on our revenue projections, both for the current fiscal year, but also next fiscal year. So I think that'll be the topic of future Cville360 shows and what we're doing. We've got some other questions coming in, and I will definitely take a look at those in a moment. If you're watching via the webinar, you can type in a message in the Q&A module. You can also raise your hand, and I'll bring your voice onto the webinar, and you can ask your question directly. If you're watching via some of our other streams on Facebook or on the city's website or Twitter, you can also switch over to the webinar and ask a question directly. You can do that by going to charlottesville.org/Zoom. And we really appreciate all the interaction we're getting today. I want to switch back to Missy Creasy. And Missy, you were going through a list of some of the things you wanted to make sure we communicated, and I interrupted you get some questions answered.
Oh, no problem.
What
No
else would you
problem
like
at all.
to share?
Well, we got Tom on there to talk a little bit about building inspections and how those are functioning, and things are going very well with that. In addition to building inspections, we also have the public right-of-way inspections. So with these larger projects that we have going around the community, there are a number of areas where the city will end up maintaining and owning parts of those projects for sidewalks and streets and et cetera. And so our inspectors who take care of those items are out in the field as well, making sure that things are done correctly. If you are working on one of these projects, we have the contact information for those inspectors. Typically at the pre-construction meeting, everyone receives a list of phone contacts for your inspections. And so that information is included on there, but we have that also on this dialogue for our website in case you need that information. The same with erosion and sediment control and stormwater. If you do have a water or sewer infrastructure item, you do need to call utilities, which you would have to do anyway, 970-3800, and they will assist you on making sure that the correct person comes forward to help you with that. So another question we had received is, what are the impacts on the timing based on our changes at this point in time? At this point in time, there is a little lag for getting information back and forth, but we have been able to maintain the required time frames that we have at this point in time. And so, yes, it adds a day or two to one end or the other. However, when we receive, when we're getting the comments back to applicants, the time frames at this point in time have remained on time for code levels. So at this point in time, we're not seeing that change. We're hoping that folks will stay well so that the opportunity for that to continue will occur, and we're prepared to move forward with this as long as we need to. We also are looking at this process regularly. Every day we come across a new hiccup or something that we can work through. We have a number of opportunities to review and work through that, and anytime we're able to make a change within the parameters that we have, we work forward to do that. Some of the things would be very resource intensive, and so we're very conscious of that. There are a lot of other activities that are going around the city and a lot of activities that need to occur. But I will let you note that we've got some significant construction projects that are currently underway that are continuing during this time. We are continuing to make sure that they receive inspections and that they receive the support that they need in order to continue moving those forward. We're working with homeowners as well on smaller projects and making sure that those things get done as best they can within our current world. And, our role is to continue to help people work through the development process in our changed world.
Great. We've got some other questions coming in, and I'll read some of those in just a moment. What I hear our staff saying, though, in some of the talk back and forth here is, to Neil Williamson's question about things in the pipeline, our staff is continuing to work with applicants to get their projects ready once we're fully open again. And then also, developers can keep talking with our planners and start assembling the rezoning and SUP applications so that those packages are ready once the coronavirus pandemic is over. One quick question, Missy, perhaps you know the answer off the top of your head, or maybe someone else does. From Dustin Green, the city's design standards manual, they noted that it changed earlier this year. Where would they find a list of those changes?
I'm sure there's a specific place on the website. I don't know, Jeff, do you know that off the top of your head? If not, we can get that information.
Where a list exists of all
Go ahead, Jack.
I don't know where a list of all the changes are on the website. I can look for that, but some of them, I don't know that every single change is going to be listed on there because some of them are in the weeds of some of the text that's in there. But I will have a look and see if we can post that somewhere for you.
Great. Dustin, you can certainly send me an email at wheelerb@charlottesville.org, and I'll be happy to respond with whatever information our staff can put together. We've got another question here related to the BAR, review and approval. Will they conduct virtual meetings to keep the review process moving forward? I think we addressed that earlier in the webinar, that was not something that they were able to do. Also, city inspections. We've got some feedback here that says it's been really smooth and a great process, and Don Hicklin thanks us for that. Any other additional comments on the BAR review and approval from our panel? And if you start talking, I'll bring your video up.
I think we're the BAR is another one of the boards and commissions that we have, and so we're awaiting things to change from that. But I know that in the meantime, our preservation staff has been working with applicants and getting things organized in such a way that once we are ready, that we will be incredibly busy.
Great. And Valerie Long has a question, and Ashley Davies had a similar suggestion. Other jurisdictions around the state, including Albemarle County, are planning to hold public hearings on rezonings and SUPs by electronic means after adopting ordinances designating public bodies such as Council, Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission as essential to the continuity of government. Is that something the city would consider? And Lisa, maybe we'll put you on the spot, and I know you can't speak for everyone, but is there anything you can share about what other localities are doing versus what the city has done thus far?
Hi, Brian. I can't speak to what other localities are doing or how they've made their determinations. What I can say is that when City Council adopted the ordinance based on the law that allows certain activities to take place contrary to the laws that generally apply, such as FOIA, City Council had a very specific discussion at their meeting at which I believe Councilor Snook asked a question to clarify that the activities and the meetings that could take place completely electronically without members of a board or commission present were those that were essential for continuity of government. They did not walk through topic by topic to make specific findings about which things they considered essential to continuity versus others, and perhaps other communities, boards, and elected officials are making specific findings, but the city has not done that at this time, and the guidance that we received on the evening that ordinance was adopted was that the types of things that would be considered essential to continuity of government were things such as how to get the budget adopted on time.
Thank you, Lisa. Valerie and Ashley, I'll make sure that all of the Q&A that has been provided for this webinar gets shared with our city management so that they can see some of these ideas that you put forward. If anyone else would like to ask a question of our panel, you can raise your hand or you can type it into the Q&A module. Again, earlier today we put out a media release that has a number of frequently asked questions that are now on the neighborhood development website. You can find that at charlottesville.org/NDS, and that has the current business process that the city has put in place to keep as many of these activities going as we can do. And these are difficult times for everyone. We're all learning how to do business differently. I think one interesting thing about Lisa Robertson's comment, our city council took early action to ensure that continuity of government issues could be addressed, especially related to budget and financial matters. And we were one of the first adopters of these webinars as a way to keep the public engaged in our government. So we took those initial steps quickly, and I'm glad we did those things, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to change as we watch and see how the pandemic continues to unfold. So looking at a few other questions here, this is from Aaron Hannigan. So to clarify, City Council will need to adopt a new ordinance allowing City Council, BAR, Planning Commission to hold electronic public hearings on land development issues. And I do think that's an accurate statement. And if I'm wrong about that, Lisa Robertson can chime in. Travis Patila, sorry if I mispronounced your name. Are there any aspects of the comprehensive plan update process continuing to move forward at this time? I want to go to Missy Creasy to talk about that, because I think we do have some examples of how we've had some success stories. Why don't you tell us about how that conversation is continuing?
Sure. We are continuing forward with the comp plan process at this point in time. We had a virtual steering committee earlier this week. It was quite the experience. We had 40 people on there, and our consultants were managing that, and they were able to allow that to be productive. It was much more focused on presentation, and then there was limited discussion as much as you can with that many people virtually. But it worked out really well, and they're working with us to try and put forth virtual ways of gathering input at this phase of the process. Basically, trying to change the process in such a way that we can continue forth getting some information at this point in time, and then when we're able to do things in full force, we can do that as well. So things are starting to move forward, and we hope soon to have more information on when those virtual opportunities for the public to join in that will be.
Another project that's moved forward throughout the pandemic has been our work on our new website. So the city will be launching a new website on Monday, April 27th. And I imagine many of the people on this webinar spend a lot of time on the city website. So I want you to know that we're really excited about the new platform that we've got. While it does not initially take care of the electronic submissions of plans and documents that we've been talking about, it will greatly streamline your access to information on the city's website and allow you to subscribe to a lot of new features to keep you informed. So again, April 27th, we'll be rolling that out, and we look forward to your feedback on that. We've got a few minutes left, and I just want to see if any of our panelists have any final remarks they'd like to make. Tom, why don't we start with you and see if there's anything else you'd like to add to the conversation?
I think the main thing is to reiterate what Chris said in the beginning. You know, I'm getting a lot of emails, and people think that the city shut down and that there's no way they can get building permits. So I'm probably a couple a day, probably sending out a couple emails a day, letting them know, no, we're still accepting building permits, we're still making inspections. So that's something, and I'm sure that the information that was put on our website, is letting people know that too. But that's probably the most important thing I have to say.
Great. Jack, we'll switch to you. You can unmute yourself. Any final comments?
No, I just, again, reiterate, we're doing the best we can to keep things moving as best we can. I think that inspections especially have been going pretty smoothly, and I'd just like to thank the construction community for doing a pretty good job so far, as I've heard, in social distancing and being responsible, because our inspectors do have to go out there and interact. They don't have much choice in the matter, and so everybody's continued participation in that regard would be appreciated.
Excellent. Lisa Robertson, final thoughts.
I don't have any final thoughts. My role is mostly to support staff in trying to continue to support everybody who needs to get their business done. So we do all take it very seriously, and we're all working as hard as we can. And as Ms. Creasy said earlier in the day, we are all working from home all day long. So we're responding to emails and we're returning phone calls. So please stay in touch, and we're trying to get things done as normally as possible, with as much being done electronically as we're set up to handle.
And Missy, thank you for bringing this idea to Cville360 to do a show about this. And any final thoughts for us?
Well, I'm just grateful we had the opportunity to be able to share this information, to get it out to the public. I know that some places have done that much more quickly. We've been working with the individual folks we've been who have projects in, and then now we're getting it to a broader span. You know, I'd like to thank the folks within the department and broader folks within the development review team for the hard work that they've done to help us get this together. Major shout out to our inspectors, both building, property maintenance, and construction inspectors. They are doing some amazing work, and you know, they're really keeping things going. I also want to thank our permit techs who are making sure that everything is scheduled in order for those things to happen. And you know, things are not perfect, but we keep making a lot of strides with things, and we appreciate the feedback that we've gotten, because that gives us the opportunity to improve things as much as we can. Thank you, Missy. And then in the studio, Chris Engel, any final thoughts?
Yeah, Brian, I would just say that, you know, prior to March 12th, we had an incredibly robust economy here, including the development pipeline was absolutely full, the fullest it's been in 10 years. There's no reason that when we come out of the end of this that we can't resume that right away and hopefully get back to a new normal. It'll be different. There'll be some changes, but I'm optimistic that we return to a state of normalcy as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you for watching. Our next show will be on April 14th at 11 a.m. We will focus on how the city schools and education is taking place during the coronavirus. We'll have a panel that includes our superintendent, Dr. Rosa Atkins. And again, another reminder, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, there'll be a special broadcast. The Thomas Jefferson Health District will have a COVID-19 town hall. We hope you'll tune into that. Please contact me if you have feedback and ideas for future shows. Thank you for watching, and please stay healthy.